Welcome to the Wilderness Season podcast. I'm your host, Sherry Ward. I have a passion to bring hope and breakthrough to those experiencing the toughest times of their lives. In this podcast, we will give you critical insights and revelations as I interview people just like you, those who have been right where you are and understand exactly what a wilderness season is all about. It's real, it's raw, it's practical. Come join the conversation. Welcome to the Wilderness Season podcast. Yay!
Yay!
We have Dr. Evelyn Garcia on the show today. So I want to welcome you to the Wilderness Season podcast, and I'm your host, Sherry Ward. And with us today, we have Dr. Evelyn Garcia on the show. Welcome, Evelyn. Yay.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. I've been wanting to come on board a long time now.
I know. I'm so excited that it totally worked out. And then it's so much fun to have a Square Tree author and a friend and an amazing bio. So I'm just going to give a background so that people know where you're at. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening on Facebook, we want you to go ahead and in the comments, put where you're from. We would love to know where you're listening from. We now have 14. Can you believe that, Evelyn? 14 different countries. Yay.
That's
the crowd goes
amazing.
wild. Yeah.
Yay.
So Dr. Evelyn Garcia is a licensed clinical psychologist, and she is currently the founder and CEO of a psychological corporation located in San Fernando Valley in California, which provides psychological and neuropsychological assessment services to children and adults. She's been working in the Latino community in the U.S., Central and South America, and she's been invited to speak in seminars and events coordinated by the U.S. Embassy and United Nations of El Salvador. That's my favorite part.
Yes.
And the project included training professionals in the medical, educational, and military community and training them to better understand the impact of mental illness and developmental disorders. My favorite part, she is the author of a book, Square Tree publisher. Woo! Mama decía, tú puedes salir adelante. Did I say that okay? How's my
Very
Spanish?
Good. Very good Spanish.
A testimony of her mother's perseverance, faith, generosity, and life story, overcoming tremendous adversity as an immigrant single mother. So welcome to the show, Evelyn, and I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much.
Well, the topic is the wilderness season. So what we want to do is talk about your wilderness journey. So do you want to give us a little background on what happened to you in the wilderness and your story?
Sure. So my wilderness story started, I believe, a little bit before 2013. 2013 was when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, lung cancer, adenocarcinoma. And it had already started, but I think that my mom's diagnosis definitely intensified it. And then it lasted after as well, because I always tell people, it doesn't, one difficult time doesn't come just one. It's like 3-4 things at the same time going on. So.
And I think that is the wilderness season. And how would you define a wilderness season versus a heavy trial? Because I know that always gets brought up. I ask people, how many times have you been in the wilderness? Oh, 5. And I'm like, I hope I don't ever go through that again.
Definitely not. And I think the difference for me was I describe it as I felt that although God was with me, I felt that my prayers were not being answered. Like the gates of heaven were close to me. And even though I prayed, I fasted, I, surrendered, I did everything, but I just felt that although I knew God was there with me, it still felt gloomy, lonely. It still felt cold. It still felt gray. Where I feel that when it's an attack, it's just very intense, but then there's breakthrough. With the wilderness, I felt it was just a long time of unanswered prayers.
Mm-hmm. And so you said that you felt like you were starting to come into the wilderness, and then unfortunately your mom got diagnosed. So you want to tell us a little bit more about that part of the story?
Yes. So it happened, it had been happening, and I felt that there was a process that I had to go through that in retrospect, in hindsight, it makes complete sense, but not as you're going through it. So I feel that the Lord had to kind of work in my heart, because one of the things I say is that circumstances have not changed, but my heart changed in the process. So I just felt that I was in a kind of, I had come to a place in my faith where I was a Christian for 32 years,
Hmm.
but I was not feeling victorious. I was feeling a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. And, I wasn't, I felt, but I'm not sinning, but I just felt this uncomfortableness, and just, I would go to church, I would serve, but there was no, I felt there was no fruit in my life.
Hmm.
So that's how it started. And then my mom's diagnosis hits. And there I'm faced with, I need to pray. I'm going to battle this out. We're going to win this. The enemy's not going to be able to take her. And that prayer doesn't get answered. So that just kind of intensified everything and made it a lot more difficult. My walk with God was shaken.
Wow. Well, your mom ended up passing away, right?
She did, 3 years
Can
later.
can you tell us, I remember one of my things that I love that your mom said, because obviously Mama Decia, it was came from the book. One of the favorite things that your mom said to you when she passed away about healing. Can you go ahead and reiterate that? Because that's one of my favorite things that she said to you.
That has been the most important thing, one of the most important things my mom said to me before she died. My mom had a faith that was so strong that I didn't even know how strong it was until she had to go through the process. And being very sick and not understanding, my mom's question was, why doesn't God heal me? I already did everything. I prayed, I surrendered, I did everything, and God's not healing me. But one of the things she said to me, and I still remember, we were at the hospital, and she looked at me and she said, I, even if I am not healed here on earth, I will believe in a God, in a healing God. And I want you, and when she looked at me very fiercely, said, and I want you to believe in a healing God as well. That shook me, because at that time I was like, God, but if you're a healer, why aren't you healing her? I don't understand this. So that was so powerful, hearing it from my mom. It was a message directly from God, because God knew at that point I was going to listen to whatever mom said. So
Yeah.
it was so powerful at that point. And now I'm like, Mom, you did a number on me, really.
Well, even I've heard that story before, and even you saying it again, it's like I guess goosebumps all over again. There's just so much power, and I kind of, it reminds me of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they
Mm-hmm.
said, even if God doesn't save us from this fire, like we're still going to believe that God is God. And it's,
And that's where it's so that's the word. I find that was the word that carried me through
mm,
after mom died, because there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of disappointment, there was a lot of negative emotions. I tell people my faith was at a 1% at that point after mom died, because I couldn't understand it.
wow, that must have been really tough. So, what were some of the things that after your mom did pass away, what are some of the things that you struggled with, and then what brought you out of that?
I struggled with, I always tell people, but we all have a primary emotion. So my primary emotion up to that point was anger. I wouldn't get sad. I wouldn't get anxious. I would get angry. Anything that happened to me, anger was my first emotion. So there was a lot of anger towards, mom dying. It wasn't so much, I know your parents are usually going to die before you. It wasn't that. It was, the loss. It was the disappointment that my prayer hadn't been answered. My prayer for my mom's healing hadn't been answered. So it was that anger and the disappointment of, why should I come to God then? He didn't answer, and it was interesting because I knew God was there, and I could feel his hugs, during the whole process, but I wanted to be mad at him, and I wanted to keep him at a distance and say, no, I'm so angry at you. Don't hug me.
He's like, no, I'm not letting you go.
I'm not letting you. And that's exactly what happened.
How did you come out of that? How did God heal you through not just losing your mom, but losing her so early and to a disease and then being in the wilderness? How did you come out of that?
I could not bypass the sitting with God and sitting, like my friend says, in that mess, in those feelings. And you're like, oh, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to think this. I don't want to be angry at God. I don't want to sit there. But it was, I tell everyone that about 10 months after mom passed, I could not go to my place of prayer that I have right next to my bed in my room. I couldn't go there because I couldn't face God, because I was like, I'm just angry at you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to be with you. And I never left church. I never left God. I just couldn't sit there with him in that mess. But there was one day, and I know that my church was praying. I know my pastors at that time were praying for me. So many people were praying for that breakthrough. And I want to encourage anyone who's praying for anyone where you don't see change, just keep praying, because that day came for me like 10 months later. And I remember sitting and said, finally, I got the courage, and I was nervous. And I sat there and I just cried for 2 hours. And I told God, my heart is broken in a million pieces. And I know you're the only one who can heal me. And that was powerful, Sherry. That was the point of where I just surrendered everything. And I said, I give up. I give up. I can't keep fighting. I can't keep ignoring you, because his presence and his hug, he had me so tight. I couldn't ignore him anymore. And that's when I just said, okay, do your thing. Do your thing. Here I am. I'm going to surrender my anger, my disappointment. I'm going to surrender everything to you. There had come a point in my mom's illness that I remember telling God, I will give you everything back. I will give you all my degrees, which gave me a lot of identity in the past. That was a big identity piece for me. I will give you bachelor's. I will give you my postdoc. I will give you everything, but just give my mom 5 more years. I will go back to being a teacher. I will not be a psychologist. Just give my mom 5 more years. So you can imagine, here I am with God saying, I'll give everything just to keep her 5 more years. That doesn't get answered. I was pretty angry, so it was like, you don't want it?
Yeah. I'm giving you everything. Okay,
I'll take it
back. Fine, I'll just take my degrees back. Okay, so I have a really good question here. Now, to me, that would be surrendering. But then 10 months later, you said, I surrendered. So break that down for me, because at the onset, it looks like you surrendered. Obviously, it was a negotiation. But what's the difference in the surrendering?
I think that the first one was, there's different things we need to surrender to. The first one was surrendering from keeping God at a distance from me. That was like, okay, fine, hug me. Come and hug me then. Fine, I'm not going to push you away anymore.
But I'm not going to hug you back. I'm not going to hug you back, but you can hug me. Okay.
So it's that surrender. The other piece was just surrendering all I am, and all the gooey, all that mess that I had been sitting in, and not wanting to address it. And I think that that's what's important in surrender, that sometimes we need to sit and surrender several things. For me, that was the case. I had to surrender several things. There was a lot of pride tied to my achievements and my degrees. So I had to surrender that. And that was pretty painful, I have to say. And then I had to surrender the emotions. And then I had to surrender, because I, as a psychologist, wanted to piece my heart back together. I'm a psychologist. I know how to do that. And God had to show me, there's supernatural healing. And that's what I felt I received. I received the supernatural healing from that, from the loss, from the disappointment. So that's how I see the difference in different surrendering that I had to do.
So was the first surrender a true surrender or more a negotiation? Like, did you really give up the degrees the first time around? Or was it more like a negotiation and then the second time you really did give it up?
I think it was probably a negotiation. If you give me this, then I'll give them to you, but you got to give me this. And that was probably where the disappointment was afterwards, because, well, you didn't find them, I'll take them back. So I think that was definitely a different type of surrender. It was a conditional surrendering where God walked me into a complete surrendering after.
Yeah, like I call it just flat out on the carpet surrender. Like I give uncle, I'm tapping out, I'm gone. Like, all right, you got it all. And what kinds of conversations did you have with the Lord? I know that you talk about him hugging you even when you didn't hug him back. What are some types of conversations that you were hearing in the wilderness from him?
All my life, I grew up thinking, I can't tell God I'm angry at him because I can't ask God why. I can't do any of that because that's a sin. How dare I? But I remember that, I never listened, and it's funny because my mom would always say many things and teach me many things, but I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to listen on that one, So all my leaders and everyone, I'm like, I get you, I hear you, but I'm just not going to listen, So I feel that I didn't listen, and I just sat there with God, and there was whys. I had to ask the why, but there's two different whys. One why that says, why are you doing this to me, God? How dare you do this to me? And I've done a couple of those in the past, but this time during the surrendering part, it was more of like, I just want to understand. It wasn't a, why are you? How dare you? It was more of a humble surrender, saying, I fought you. I've done everything. Just help me understand the why. I just wanted to understand, why are my prayers not answered? What am I doing wrong? Why? So it was I call it a different why.
Okay, so I want you to, that's gold. Okay, for all of you who are listening or watching, that was a golden nugget right there. I want you to unpack the second one, the second why. So when you completely surrendered in humility, wanting to understand what the why, what did you feel he said?
He really never answered my why until years later. And the thing is, and not fully, maybe I don't even think he has answered the why, but the what for. So at that point, the why was because I wanted to heal, but nothing, no answer could heal the loss of a mom or a dad or anyone that you love. No answer can do that. You just literally have to sit there, open your heart up and say, okay, Lord, here it is. But from God, I think it was the why. After mom passed away, that launched me a few years later, the surrender, the why. A few years later, I felt that mom's death launched me into purpose and assignments, into my purpose and assignment in life. So that's when I got the why. It had to happen. It had to happen. I'm like, but if mom would have been alive, she would have been the biggest cheerleader. We would have written that book together. We would have done everything together. But I don't know if it would have happened if mom wouldn't have passed away. Because, I had never faced such a loss. And I had faced loss before, but
Right.
not to that intense degree.
Wow. Wow. So what are some things that once you poured out your heart, you fully surrendered, it's that kiss the carpet moment, as I call it.
Yes.
What happened after that?
I felt God gave me an invitation of rise and shine. And it was interesting because I was like, you want me to rise and shine? But I was that daughter that was really mad at you. A couple of years ago, I was that daughter that had no faith, or I'm going to say 1% because my faith really didn't leave,
Right.
So it was like, I was that rebellious daughter that sat down and said, I'm not going to serve you. I'm angry at you. And I'm like, you're inviting me to do something and write? I'm like, what? So I feel that after that, that complete surrendering, and I had surrendered in the past many times, but it was a powerful breakthrough surrendering that just changed my life completely around and changed my heart. And I think that that's the most important part. My heart was completely changed because I still have unanswered prayers. My mom didn't come back from the dead, but my heart changed. And that was the biggest part. My heart changed. The Lord invited me to rise and shine and say, out of the ashes, you want to get out of the ashes? Then rise and shine. I will light my light upon you, and I'm launching you to do something good that came directly from my mom's legacy.
Wow. Okay, so now we want you to unpack the arise and shine, because I know that the beautiful thing about God is that he speaks to each of us individually in a language that we understand. So what does arise and shine mean to you? Like, what did that end up becoming, or what did you do from that arise and shine?
So in my heart, before mom died, God had put for me to write the book with her. And I just wanted, her and I to write a book. And at the same time, God puts in my heart a desire to go back to El Salvador, where we're from, where my mom was from, and just take this message to children, saying your current circumstances don't determine your future. Because my mom had come from both my mom and dad, extreme poverty, no shoes, barely any food, from rural areas of El Salvador. And there's my mom, what the world will call an insignificant woman, because she was never, eloquent. She was never rich. She was never any of that. So there comes this little girl from Jiquilisco, El Salvador. And, her biggest ministry was her three daughters. She never had a platform. She never taught. She was a small group teacher, but her biggest ministry was her three daughters. She taught us faith that overcame even the toughest moments in life. So she teaches us all these lessons, and she doesn't know we're learning all that as her daughters. So then this is the lesson I'm bringing to kids and saying, my mom was right here where you're at. And now her daughter can come here and tell you poverty doesn't define you. You can rise and shine. So I feel that that's where God, kind of called me and said, I have this assignment. I want you to go back to El Salvador. I want you to train the people who work with these kids, because I don't live in El Salvador, so I have to train the people that work with them,
Right.
and also come and talk to the kids as well. So I've done both.
So this kind of leads into what you're talking about now. So the number one question our viewers always want me to ask is, what is the promised land like?
Wow. I have been walking in such abundant spiritual blessings after after my big breakthrough of surrendering, just the promised land.
And how long was that? Was that 5 years?
the about approximately, give and take, I think it was around 5 years, because it took a little longer after mom. So let's see, yeah, 2013 to 2018, yeah, approximately 2018 was when I stepped out and said, okay, let's do it, God, let's go. And I have been walking in such freedom. God healed my heart, not only from loss, but also during that whole surrender. God's like, I invite you to continue sitting with me, because there's some things from the past that I need to heal you from, that you have forgiven, but you still need healing from that. So I felt that continued. And Promised Land for me looks that intimacy with God that for 30 something years, so walking with God, I really never had. That freedom to just be able to go to God and say, hey, God, this is just yesterday I was walking. I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to ask you something here that's outrageous. But it's that freedom. It's being able to be used by God to take a message to people that are crying out for someone to arise, crying out for God to come and give them a message of hope. And I feel that that's where it's at, that abundant walking in blessing, in victory, in so much. I want to say that joy. After mom passed away, I'm like, I don't know how I'm ever going to smile and laugh again and enjoy life.
Yeah.
I am at a point, I was just, sharing with my Facebook friends, I'm about to be 48, Sherry. And I am at a point in life when I feel so utterly happy with life, where I'm at, what I do, what I'm doing. And my favorite part of what I'm doing is that project in El Salvador. That's my favorite part. Like, I look forward to it. I can't wait till the next time, that I get invited back and we do things. And that's the Promised Land, where you feel you're giving God your everything and you're living in that surrender. And I think that you have to continue living and being completely surrendered, because I feel that that's the key. And I always share with people, my friend gave me a key. And I remember when she gave it to me, I was mad. I'm like, how dare you tell me that? But she says, walk in humility and surrender. And in Spanish, there's surrender means two things. Mm-hmm. So she said 3 keys, because there's 2 things to surrender in Spanish. So I add and walk in forgiveness, because for years I struggled with unforgiveness. I was always in conflict with people. I was always angry. There was always something going on. And I'm finally, the Promised Land, Sherry, for me, is not being in conflict anymore, being conflict free. And that feels really good.
That's so awesome. So what would you say to people? I know that we just had Mother's Day and Father's Day is coming up. So what would you say to people that have lost their mom, their dad, somebody significant, and that's been part of their wilderness journey? What would you say to them to give them hope?
Sit there with God. You can't bypass that. That's the bottom line. You can't ignore him. Sit there. He'll understand. My sisters and I gave ourselves that time to grieve and be sad, because a lot of times as Christians, we were like, I'm in victory, I'm in joy, I'm like, I'm not in victory and I'm not in joy. My mom just died, and I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna be angry and I'm going to cry every time I talk about her, and I'm gonna remember her and I'm going to cry. I gave myself that time. So the best thing you can do is give yourself that time to grieve, and it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to grieve. But just make sure that that you allow God to just hug you and be there with you. Because I do feel it could have been faster, but I was just like, no, I'm too angry. And I think just being real tell God how you feel, because he already knows how you feel. And don't be afraid. He's not going to strike you.
With a big yeah. Yeah.
He's going to love you. And I always tell people, God encountered me right where I was. And that's what God will do for you. But give yourself that time. It's okay not to be there right after it happens. You know, if it's been 10 years and you're still there, I would highly encourage you to really ask God, I want to be done with this, Lord. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to do it. And it's different for everyone too. The journey is different for everyone.
That's true. I love that, because so many times, instead of a funeral, it's a happy celebration of going to heaven and all this. And I call it the Jesus happy Band-Aid. They just want to stick this little Jesus happy Band-Aid and everything's fine. And it's not. And I love today how you've been talking about just living in your mess. And that's not something that we talk about a lot in the Christian community, is just being where you're at, telling God how you feel. Getting angry with him is okay. Like, just, he already knows anyway. So you might as well just say it, and just living in your mess. So I just love that. That's some really good, rich stuff right there. Do you have anything else?
And Sherry, I loved your book because for many years, there was this conflict in me, because I was like, but I'm not joyful, and I'm not victorious, and and there was this conflict, but I have to be, so let me put on the happy face. But then it will come out, and that's the part. You can't hide pain. You have to go in there, and I call it the little worms of pain. You got to go take out those little worms out of your
worms
heart.
Worms,
yes,
worms,
gusanitos.
Okay.
Gusanitos. Those worms, because you literally have to be like, oh, there's one. Oh, let me take it out. Oh, wait, there's another one right there. Oh, that one's really deep in my heart. I thought it was gone. And it's so important. Books like yours are so important, because when I read your book, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you for saying it, because people cannot understand us if because we tend to focus on the victory. Oh yeah, now God is using me. Oh yeah, now I'm in freedom. Yeah, now I'm in walking. But those 5 years, I sat there crying, feeling pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Those years were very important. So yeah, it's definitely, the Band-Aid came off.
And the gloves came out.
They sure did.
That's awesome. That's awesome, because I know that sometimes we just cover right over that, and we have to deal with it. We really have to deal with it, and just be, there was a season where God said, just be. I'm like, I don't know what that means. It's like, I'm a doer. I'm an A+ personality. Go, go, go. Degrees, credential, to-do list. Like, let's do it. And God's like, just be. And I'm like, I don't know how to be with you. I know how to do for you. But I don't quite know how to just be with you.
Now I know why we get along so well. It's always about doing. And, and I felt it during that time. God's like, sit down. I'm about to teach you something. And I'm like, but I don't want to sit. I'm so active in church. I don't want. And I literally felt God say, you need to sit down, because your heart is completely wrong. And this was before the whole, your heart needs to heal. You're fighting with everyone. Like, stop that.
Stop it. Stop it right now. And I think, a lot of times in business, they say, oh, it was the 20-year overnight success, right? But I think the same is true in the spiritual realm, where people see you blessed, or things are really taking off and doing all of this, but they don't realize the backstory of the wilderness, of before you even got there, what happened to you, and the things that you had to wrestle with the Lord over. And it sounds like you've done a lot of wrestling, a lot of like punching it out, and he hugged you even when you didn't want to hug him back. So I just love this. Is there any other encouragement that you would like to give our listeners today?
Just I love this. God wants to use us all. And every part of your journey is a lesson. It's a tool that you collect along the way. every part of your journey. So I just want to tell you that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, what you've done, no matter what, God wants to just hug on you, love you, and use you. And I always share with people one thing that our friend Kamaya taught me, and it was so strong for me. When she said it in a meeting, she said, God's economy, it's not money, it's people. And that really, the way she said it, there was such anointing in that, because it's so true. When I stopped focusing on I need to achieve, and when I stopped that then and started focusing on loving people and not being in conflict with people and not being angry at people for what they do, what they say, and not having that offended heart, that's when the victory came. So, God wants to use all of us and love on us. And he wants to pour his love on us so we can pour it on others. So healing and sitting in your mess and healing from that mess and from that loss and just communicating and partnering with God. That's all he wants.
That's so awesome. Well, how would our listeners get a hold of you if you want to talk a little bit about your project in El Salvador, what you're doing, and then how they can reach you? That would be amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. So my project is my mom's legacy. It's Abuelita Miriam, Rise and Shine. So it's Grandma Miriam, Rise and Shine. And we get invited back to El Salvador all the time. It gets bigger and bigger every time we go.
I'm loving it.
I love it. So we do everything from training teachers to the medical field to the military field, and every year it's different. So this year we've been invited back to do a women's conference, two, and talking about forgiveness, healing, and restoration, which is that's what the wilderness taught me: forgiveness, healing, and restoration. So we're going back, and yeah, it's a great project that we just started in 2018, and it's being just gotten so big. I'm like, wait, God, you're going way faster than I am here.
Hold on.
I literally have to hold on because he just takes me 100 miles an hour, but it's always such a blessing. And anyone, there's drevelyngarcia.com. I have my website where where my current book is, and my new book that we're getting published.
Yay. Yay.
And so that will be on my website and Facebook. That's the best way to connect with me, and also email Dr. Evelyn Garcia at psychologicalcorp.com.
Okay, awesome. And on Facebook, what's the name on Facebook?
Dr. Evelyn Garcia.
Okay, so it's Dr. Evelyn Garcia all the way around, guys. So that's a good thing. So thank you so much for being on the show today. And until next week, we will see you on the Wilderness Season podcast. Thank you for listening to the Wilderness Season podcast. If you need help navigating through your own wilderness season, pick up a copy of my book, A Journey Out of the Wilderness, available on Amazon. Also, continue the conversation online with us by going to our Wilderness Season Facebook page. For resources and events, you can go to www.sherrylynnward.com. If you have enjoyed this show, please subscribe and review our podcast. Just remember, you're not alone.